looking for your horse.
Welcome back, everybody, to Jung To Live By. Today we've got a fantastic show in store for yourself. We got a comment fairly recently that was very well thought out, and obviously the individual involved disclosed quite a lot about themselves, so we thought we'd do a video on it. You know, sort of do that kind of comment justice. And it goes like this. I was raised by a narcissistic mother, and I only realised it after an ego death on entheogens at 22 years old. I'm now 24 years old. That was the moment when I realised my perspective on life was based on her manipulations. I'm gay now, and I often have the sensation that that I'm really not, and this happens because of my abuse and how she treated me. She slept with me until my teen years, always shaming my father for his sexual desires, made comments about other men's sexiness, get naked around me, and so on. Now I'm trying to go no contact with her, but for sure I know my perspective on women has been deeply affected. I have narcissistic traits, I've done shadow work, and I can see how I've manipulated people, most in the same way that my mother manipulated me. Now I'm at a very confusing time in my life, oscillating between a gay life and the task to fulfill my biological role. I also have BPD traits. I don't expect an answer to my problems, but any piece of advice helps. Everybody is welcome to give an opinion. Thanks.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. That takes a lot of courage.
Absolutely.
And you certainly have our respect for that. Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, I guess this really falls in with a kind of a part two of the Slaying Your Mother complex video that we put out. It's unfortunately quite common that we're seeing more and more cases like this, although I can remember one very similar going back at least 30 years.
Yes.
So it's not a new phenomenon. It's perhaps just the volume of people coming forward with this kind of problem, which is increasing. The elements there are, as I say, all too common, sadly. And I really feel for this person and what he's going through, and the fact that he's got as much insight as he has. I don't personally accept at this stage that he really does have a borderline personality disorder, or even that the narcissistic traits are innate to him as such. They're both more likely to be a symptomatic expression of his distress, and the degree to which he's identifying with them, that means he's incorporating them into his self-concept. That's important for him to get to grips with. When we talk about an ego-identified complex, that's something which is incorporated within that shouldn't be there. It's not natural to us, but we've absorbed it through conditioning of the environment, conditioning through other people, and that includes the kind of thing that we've spoken about on other podcasts, such as how you may even take on another person's type, for example. And after a while we get into this confirmation bias situation where we will look for evidence that supports why we feel the way that we do or have the beliefs that we have, and we can even go so far as to get other people to agree with that, to confirm that within ourselves. People will frequently do that to therapists, and many therapists fall into that trap of actually agreeing with the presentation of symptoms. So if somebody says, I have a particular condition, say borderline personality disorder, or I have narcissistic traits, then the therapist will just nod and agree, and therefore confirm a complex, a pathogenic incorporate into that person's self-concept. The self-concept is a specific part of the ego, of the ego, which itself is a complex. And within that, when you incorporate things in, you're basically building your internal mirror, the thing that you refer to say that is me. If you've acquired a theory or influence that suggests that you have, as in this case, borderline personality disorder or narcissistic traits, you may then start to believe and act and tell other people that you are that way. Of course, you will know deep down inside that's not the case, that you're suffering, but this has been incorporated, and then you get the split, and I think that's what we're saying now. Somebody who truly has a borderline personality disorder may well boast about it. They do, often they do, but this isn't a boast. This is a signal, a request for help. This is not somebody boasting that they've got this particular trait which is negative and allows them to control other people. He's been exposed to narcissism through his mother from his account. He's been exposed to personality disorder traits from his mother, from his account. And it's part of the overall ambience that he's developed within, and then he's selected certain things out to incorporate within his self-concept. The fact that he is now gay is probably also a function, as he says himself, of his experience.
Yeah.
That's not to say there's anything abnormal about that particular sexual orientation, but within this specific concept, he is saying he believes that that's led that to his sexual orientation at the moment. So he's seeing it potentially as a problem. It may well be that when he addresses and finally resolves this problem, that he's still gay and it's normal for him and he's perfectly happy. What I will say is that in many of the cases that I've experienced over the past 4+ decades of my own clinical work, I've seen the same profile of distress emerging in people and the same shift into a sexual orientation that very often people feel that they wouldn't have chosen for themselves necessarily had it not been for the influence upon them, as in this case from a mother whose boundaries were completely inappropriate. Yeah. So he's suffering terribly, really, really badly. His solution is going to be deep, because that's where the wound is, and that will be at the level of instincts. Yeah. And how he's guided to that will be very, very important with respect to the outcome. Otherwise, he may stay on the surface where his distress is and become habituated to displaying the distress without solving it. It's what Freud called repetition compulsion, where we end up having to act out and to repeat patterns of behaviour in an attempt to solve a problem, but it doesn't actually solve it. The neuropsychoanalysts talk about it too, in the sense that a memory or a series of connected memories become so consolidated into long-term memory that they are truly unconscious. And it's very, very difficult then for the person who suffers from a trauma that's been turned into that long-term memory to deal with it. So in a therapeutic sense, there is a way out for him. There is a way to resolve this, but he would need careful support and accessing his own healing instincts, and to understand his mother's instincts as well, and how they may have gone wrong and led to this inappropriate behaviour towards him. But from his account, he is a victim. There's no doubt about that.
Without a doubt. I mean, the thing that struck me, Steve, and you know, he's been so open about his situation, which is, like you say, is incredibly brave.
Yes, it is.
It's almost as if, I'm thinking instinctively now as well, as if he's been held in captivity.
Yeah.
By his mother's inappropriate instincts, really.
Yes.
And we know what happens to people in real situations where that happens, where people are held hostage, for example, that they're forced to adapt to the person that holds them captive.
Yeah, Stockholm syndrome.
Stockholm syndrome.
Yeah.
And it's no different, really, within the context of a family, or, you know, a mother-son or mother-father-son relationship, than it is where it's, you know, it's happening maybe with a stranger. Well, why should it be? The dynamics are still the same, and the instincts can be injured or be forced to adapt in a particular way accordingly. And just that was the thing that struck me, that he's been so closely bound to her at an instinctive level that he probably doesn't see the way out, because he's taking a psychological perspective rather than an instinctive one, for that matter.
Yes.
But instincts can be healed. They can be repaired, but you do need to access them, and you do need to look at what instincts have been injured, and what instincts will liberate you as well from this situation. Yeah,
he's put a lot of work in from what he says.
Yes,
he's got a lot of insight.
He has.
So all
definitely.
the preparation for the healing is in place.
It is.
That's the positive angle on this.
Yes.
And it's real. It's a real angle. The way that he's been able to paint that picture suggests that he has sufficient insight, as well as the courage necessary to go where he needs to go to heal this. But obviously a trauma, and it is a trauma. It's a long trauma. It's not a sudden, short, sharp shock. This is a continuously reinforcing trauma. Has damaged his relationship probably to women. and how he's likely to see them or even feel repelled by them. For example, a classical Freudian view would interpret it that way, that the repulsion would be based upon this obvious Oedipal style abuse by the mother towards the son. So any relationship he would have with another woman would be like incest, symbolically. And in that sense, he would have to reject relating to women in a physical way because his mother had pushed that boundary too far. And that's a classical Freudian perspective, and I'm not suggesting anything by that with respect to what may have actually gone on. I'm only going on what's been written, but there is that instinctive level that needs to be looked at. I really wish him well, I really do, sincerely and from the heart.
Can I ask a question then? You said that this type of stuff was on the rise.
Yes.
It also might help this individual to sort of detach himself a little bit from the situation and understand more broadly. Is it on the rise in terms of your population density, or is it because just the population's rising? In other words, is there an innate pathology, or is it just just keeps growing with time?
That's an interesting point. When Freud first uncovered sexual abuse in childhood, it was of such a volume that he couldn't believe it.
Yes, that's true.
Him and Josef Breuer. And then he had to accept it because of the volume of it, and then he put it out, and he was attacked immediately by all the institutions, including the professional institutions, and he was forced to withdraw. Now it seems he was probably right, because of what's come out over the past 20 years at least is the sheer volume, the almost normality of sexual abuse of children in one form or another. So it's probably a question of reporting, I think, James, and how many people are actually coming forward. And now, because of the internet, it's harder and harder for those who are doing the abusing on an institutional level to suppress that information. So it's coming through.
Yeah, it is a problem because obviously people are encouraged to come forward about abuses, but very often they're approaching the very organisations that are absolutely, rife with people who are, abusing people themselves, shall we say, and so. In some circumstances, probably in many circumstances, actually, it's actually impossible for people to get the help that we need.
It is,
and we, without getting into detail, we have some personal understanding and experience of this as well. And this is where it's very difficult, isn't it? Because these people are so vulnerable. And if you have the courage, and a lot of them do, to come out and say this and this happened to me, and then suddenly you find out that all the doors start to close on you, and that nobody, the people that should be there to help you actually turn on you, and that does happen.
It does.
What do you do? People are just forced back on themselves, and that's very difficult, because where else do you go for help but out into society and into the culture for that help? And if, like I say, those organisations that apparently provide it are corrupted themselves. And I'm afraid, to say that my personal position on that is that they are, then it's very difficult to get the help that you need.
Yes,
very, very difficult.
Yeah, he mentions archetypes and how they form from instincts, and that is important, and we have discussed this a few times. It's important not to be distracted by archetypes, and to not see archetypes where they're not there. In other words, where you've just got social constructions that aren't even genuine in that sense. Instincts, yes, are incredibly important, because if you access them, you'll find that your psyche produces a narrative for you that will bring you out of the problem. And that's where the best therapy works, is that the engagement with a therapist will help you to produce a narrative that the instincts will agree with, and will match the environment that you live in at the moment, and will also match your through line of your life, and will sync all of that together. So that's a personal creation in the moment, and it's why we use, for example, enactments, which is a very, very powerful form of psychotherapy, where you have a group of therapists involved with a single patient or client, with a chaperone, and things get worked through in a very dynamic way, and in a healing way as well. But that generates or creates a mythic narrative in the moment that's entirely natural, because nothing's imposed on the psyche. The psyche tells you, literally directs enactments. And something of that intensity and that power might be indicated for this person, or perhaps something a little slower and a little more measured and gradual, but some kind of therapeutic work. Given his insight, I think he could work this through. I really do. I really do. I have nothing but respect for him.
I know we're not necessarily talking about paedophilia here in this situation, because he's not said specifically that, you know, his mother has abused him in that way, although clearly it's inappropriate.
Yeah.
But there are more female paedophiles out there than people realise.
Oh, yeah.
It's always levelled at men, isn't it? That it's men who do the sexual abusing, but it's clearly not the case. I mean, they are in the women are in the minority statistically compared to men who perform these kinds of
those
acts.
who get caught.
Of those who get caught.
Yeah.
But we've known female paedophiles,
Oh, yes.
and I think, like you've said before, Steve, this idea of if you want to
catch a lion, go and stand with the
go
zebra.
and stand with the zebras. Yeah. A lot of them are female teachers or nursery workers. Again, working in professions where they have access to children, but it's something that's not, again, talked about routinely, because it's nearly always levelled at men, and it's as if women don't really do these things, and clearly they do. And I'm really just saying that to redress the balance.
You should have put that on.
This is all tape.
It is. Oh, right.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Oh, I should have shut up, shouldn't I?
Oh, don't worry. No, it's just to redress the balance, because it's always, you know, in this culture, it's men who do this and men who do that, and you know, all the abuse is done by men, and it's always levelled at men, and women do these things too, not to the same extent, it seems,
and often in a different way.
Do.
I know you've often pointed out that a lot of the abuse from mothers is through psychological control.
It is.
That will then sometimes bleed over into physical abuse, but they control so much of a child's life and how they adapt to the world.
Yeah, they do, and they do it. I mean, it's obvious if a man commits some kind of sex act that you know you could describe as being abusive, for obvious reasons. But for again, with women, it's so much more subtle. I mean, for example, we knew a female teacher who and she would put this out on Facebook, so it was out there in the public domain, that she would get together with her other female friends just purely to bath their children as well as her own, and in particular male children. And again, we've talked about libido, haven't we, in the past, and about, you know, you know somebody from the libido, the direction in which it flows.
You certainly do.
And this is what you see with some of these women, is that they do put themselves in position where they have access to children, other women's children, obviously, and even if it's only something like bathing them, that is part of the way in which the abuse takes place. So
and there was a male involved with that too, who would sit in on it at the very least, and also walk around naked.
That's right.
In front of these children who are not his.
That's right.
So you very often you'll get a couple who are abused. Both of them are, and they're psychopaths, and they feed off one another. One is a higher functioning one than the other usually.
And sometimes there's not. You know, I guess I'm thinking about it because of the comment about the narcissism as well, because that can be a feature. Of you know, of paedophiles as well. That there is this narcissistic element to them.
For sure, it has to be there.
It does have to be
because
there.
You're not relating to children as children. They're there for gratification.
It's about your own gratification.
It is indeed.
Yes, that's what they're there for. But it was really just to add that, because it's something which is not talked about a lot. It's commonly overlooked. But you know, women do abuse. There's no doubt about it. And
they shape the early psyche and the relating function of both genders.
They do.
Both biological genders, just to be clear. In our present climate. Which is, again, to go back to basic Jung and also to basic biology and neuropsychoanalysis, the imprinting on the mother for both sexes is important. and that is the relating function for both a boy and a girl child, which is why the girl child's relationship to a father is different fundamentally.
Why it feels so strange and alien. Yeah.
Which is an animus thing in Jungian terms, because she has to extend the genderized relating aspects, if you like, of her psyche, whereas boys don't. They relate to a female and then they relate to other females in that caring, nurturing way, or not, depending on how they've been conditioned, shall we say, by their early experiences. But it is different for girls. They have to accommodate both sexes in a way that men generally don't, in that basic way.
I just want to bolster quickly what you were saying, Pauline. It reminds me of the I think it was the FBI crime statistics from like 2014 or 2015, obviously in America. If you include made to penetrate, then women rape men 80% as much as men raping women. Which is kind of like, whoa. I think everyone goes, what the hell's that? I've had several friends who, I say this so nonchalantly, but that's the way it's treated. Several friends who've been raped by women. And it's like, well, what do you do about that? What do you do about that? It's one of those unspoken about things that then perpetuates that cycle of abuse.
And
like, if you've done that to a man, what are you going to do to your child?
Well, that's right. And I guess underneath that, you know, we're into instincts, aren't we? The desire for dominance and for power and control. All those instincts will be at work in those situations, whether they're for men or for women. And there's no getting away from that. But I do feel it's important to redress the balance, because so much, forgive the language, shit is levelled at men. And I think really we should have a more of a humanistic approach to things, in the sense that we look at things, look at ourselves as human beings first, you know, even rather than men and women. And this is what people do, not what men do or women do, but what people do to one another. And I think it should be understood in that way.
Thank you for watching this episode of Jung To Live By. If you haven't already, make sure you download our free PDF for integrating your shadow. It includes the most advanced theory on the topic available anywhere on the internet, as well as a full practical breakdown. If you've ever wanted to integrate your shadow, this is honestly the way to do it. Thanks again for watching, and take care.